Welcome Facebook Live. We are just about to start, so please hang tight there, and the formal programming will commence in just a moment. Thank you for being here. Come up close. We are so delighted to be here with you today. My name is Alaya Boisvert. I'll be your MC. And welcome to Facebook Live. I hope you can hear us. Let us know if you have any feedback. We'll do our best to speak loudly and recognize you. Welcome, everybody. This is the launch of the Sunshine Coast Sue Big Oil campaign. It's so touching to see this incredible turnout and everyone online for joining us. It's just really remarkable. This event has been organized by a dedicated, passionate group of volunteers that is part of a growing network of ordinary BCers who believe fossil fuel companies should pay their fair share of climate costs.
That's right.
Yeah. We are heeding West Coast environmental law's call to encourage local governments to join a class action lawsuit to sue Big Oil to recoup the inevitable and staggering costs due to climate change. Hear, hear. And things are heating up. If you guys haven't seen, there's some printouts of a Guardian newspaper article that was published just yesterday demonstrating how the United States Congress is doing a hearing and has uncovered report after report of big oil companies suppressing, denying, and lying to the public about the knowledge that they had about the impacts of climate change. Over the last 40 years, this is thing that we knew this was coming, they knew this was coming, and yet they totally denied what their products were going to do to the planet and do to human civilization. So that's why we're here today. And before we get into some of the substance of the Sue Big Oil campaign, I am absolutely honored to introduce Candace Campo from the Shishalh Nation. Candace has a degree in anthropology and education. She's the owner and operator of Talese Tours, an Indigenous-run adventure tourism company that is dedicated to integrating Indigenous knowledge and adventure. And she's a longtime friend, and it's just so wonderful to have you here. So welcome, thank you.
Itukwikwi, Khatsametsa Chinsquish, Sishates go omish chin Amash Utmis Siaya to Suia to Sishat Siayatine Suia to Skoomish Siayatin. Wissam is Stelhaya E to Quali one the Quayo. Good morning, my ancestral name is Khatsametsa. I welcome you all, family and friends, to the homeland of my Sishat family and the homeland of my Skoomish family, the villages of Wissam and Stelhaya. And I am a teacher at heart. When we come together on this beautiful homeland, I like to share the history of this place and share that our peoples have lived here for thousands of years, and I'm married into the Squamish community. I also have Squamish ancestry because the Salish peoples that lived in the lower part of British Columbia, their success was based on marriage, networking, and we built alliances through our marriages. So when I married my husband 25 years ago, I really felt I was doing something good, carrying on the tradition and keeping those good relations strong. And now we're here today with our settler community, our settler friends, and I'm asking you to take care of this land. It really is an honor to come here and to share with you today, to share a little bit of our history and as well as to share my words and aspirations for our future, for the unborn, understanding that we're facing very critical environmental issues and matters, but also highlighting what we're trying to achieve as a collective, as a community, to also express that, to look at all of the complexities and all of of the need of this growing issue, because a lot of our climate change is deeply affecting people who have economic needs, people of color, indigenous communities, because I run a tour company and I work with this collective of amazing cultural ambassadors. And when we lived through COVID, my heart was broken for our extroverts because the isolation was so paralyzing. I myself was in heaven, but that's but truly, when I consider some of the communities in the interior to have to survive through COVID and then have their highways washed out, and that isolation and that worry for drinking water and access for food, to have friends that I work with or live with in the city that are from the Inuit communities, knowing what big oil is doing, impacting continuously their way of life, that I feel I sometimes have to not just wear my hat as an educator, but to step forward and wear my hat as a spokesperson, as an advocate for the environment. And I share with you that within our society, within a human being, there are 4 spheres that we have capacity as human beings. There's teacher, leader, healer, and warrior. And warrior is the advocate that steps forward, that steps up for other times, for other people in a time of need. And I'm just very grateful that people have taken time out of your Sunday to come forward so that we can have a discussion and that we can have a collective energy to take care of Mother Earth. And I wish you all the best. Ol no Shishalh Messiah.
Thank you, Candace. That was absolutely beautiful. And I was tempted to wear red lipstick today in honor of the warrior in me, but I decided that might be a little intense. So my daughter and I even had a discussion about it literally. She was like, wear it. I was like, oh, I don't know. Anyways, now I know. I'm wearing my red lipstick next time. It's now my honor to introduce our next speaker, Fiona Koza. Fiona is a climate accountability strategist with West Coast Environmental Law, a nonprofit based in Vancouver. She is one of the amazing people behind the Sue Big Oil campaign, and we are so lucky to have her here today. Fiona's worked for 25 years on environmental issues and social justice at Amnesty International, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, Sierra Club, and Greenpeace. She lives and works on territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and now she's going to share with us why Sue Big Oil and how to get involved. Thank you, Fiona.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited and honored to be here. As mentioned, I work at West Coast Environmental Law as a climate accountability strategist working on the Sue Big Oil campaign. To begin and to warm up, I was just thinking maybe everybody could introduce themselves to the person beside them, or if you already know them, on the other side or in front of you or behind you. And then just say, for 1 or 2 minutes, maybe how you've been affected by climate change, or if you haven't yet, then how you anticipate maybe that your community might be affected in the coming years. I'll just take 1 minute.
There's not that many people on it. You're not.
Okay. Okay, we can come back now. Hi, everybody. So I was wondering if I could have a show of hands of how many people feel they're already feeling the effects of climate change. Okay, well, you're not alone because a survey of public opinion survey this summer of British Columbians, more than half of people are already feeling the effects of climate change. And I have to say the past year and a half, I think was a real wake-up call for people across British Columbia. I know living in the lower mainland, living through the heat dome, it was quite traumatic. And of course, tragically, over 600 people died. And soon after, well, as a result of the heat dome, also, as you know, the forest fires were rampant, caused the town of Lytton to burn to the ground. Not long later, the atmospheric river also caused devastating floods in Abbotsford and Merritt and elsewhere, landslides, thousands more to be evacuated, and also infrastructure damage. And in terms of the infrastructure damage and keeping our communities safe from climate impacts, most of those costs are borne by the local governments and by extension, the taxpayers. Vancouver, for example, I know is paying already $50 million a year to keep its citizens safe from climate change. And in the future, they're expected to have to pay $1 billion for to protect from sea level rise. Richmond expected to have to pay $4 billion for that. I don't know the statistics for the Sunshine Coast, but the Insurance Bureau of Canada says that cumulatively, local government should be spending around $5.3 billion every year to protect from climate change. So how can local governments afford this? I mean, even the city of Vancouver, with its large tax base, is not going to be able to pay those costs. And so how are smaller communities going to protect themselves from climate change? So last week, I was at the Union of BC Municipalities convention in Whistler, and there the local governments were calling on the BC government to help pay for climate costs. Well, even if they are able to get the BC government to kick in more money for this, it's still the taxpayers that are really paying, and there still isn't going to be enough money in the coffers, and it's not also addressing the source of the problem. So West Coast Environmental Law has given this a great deal of thought, consulted with many other lawyers and other experts, and determined that we really need to sue big oil in order to support local communities and to tackle the problem at the source. And why would we be suing big oil? As you know, fossil fuels are the largest contributor to climate change. Also, big oil has the money to pay. They have been making, as we said in the introduction, billions of dollars in profits while knowingly selling products that they know are causing these harms. And they've been doing this for decades. In fact, the scientists, I believe in 1959, were telling the oil companies, their own scientists were telling them that this was going to happen. These sorts of impacts would happen. So suing big oil not only helps the communities pay for the skyrocketing costs, it's also going to ensure that oil companies are held accountable and paying their true costs. Because the reason that these companies are so profitable is because they're not paying the true costs of their products. The people it's the environment, it's people, and especially the most marginalized people among us who are bearing the costs of climate change and the true costs of the oil industry. So it's time that we make the polluter pay. And when they are forced to pay their fair share of climate costs, they will no longer be as profitable. Investors will not see them as this great place to throw their money. They will think twice because of the legal risk and the financial risk that's borne through these lawsuits. For anybody who's wondering whether this is a realistic approach to take, I encourage you to think back to the lawsuits against Big Tobacco. They similarly spread misinformation, undermined the science and policy while continuing to profit from the sale of the products that they knew for years were causing this harm. These successful lawsuits against them help change that industry, and we're going to do the same thing to big oil. So the lawsuit that we've proposed is the first of its kind in Canada. However, there are around 20 similar lawsuits in the United States brought by U.S. cities and states against big oil. And there's, in fact, over 2,000 climate litigation cases around the world, but most of those are targeting governments for not doing enough, but there is also a growing number that are targeting the fossil fuel industry and other major polluters. So what we are proposing is a class action lawsuit brought by local governments in British Columbia, targeting the world's largest oil companies to make them pay their fair share of climate costs. You may have heard that in Vancouver in July, the city of Vancouver voted to do exactly this. There was a motion to launch a class action lawsuit to set aside, $1 per resident for a class action lawsuit in collaboration with other governments to sue big oil, and Vancouver City Council voted in favor of this. So they're setting aside $662,000 for a class action lawsuit. And we're seeking other local governments to join them. So for other local governments, also $1 per resident in small communities won't be a lot of money, but there will still be a lot of benefits when big oil is made to pay for the climate costs in your community. And so this is where you come in. We are trying to convince local governments, as you know, to join this class action lawsuit, and that there is the public support to do so. And there was a poll, again, a public opinion poll this summer that surveyed whether British Columbians support this. And 69% of British Columbians do support their local government suing big oil. And that, really interestingly, is true across the province. There's more than 50% in every region of the province, and even among all voters from all political parties, there's still more than 50% support for this idea. Yeah, so it's not just Vancouver. In fact, Vancouver had, in other areas, had more support. The interior had more support. The Fraser Valley even had more support for this idea. So, so I think it's really possible that, encouraging that other local governments will join. I was speaking with a lot of local government councillors and mayors at the Union of BC Municipalities this week, and a lot are encouraged and excited about this idea. And we'll wait and see how the October election goes, but hopefully we can elect a lot of climate champions. So the Sue Big Oil campaign is collaborating with community activists to help spread the word about the campaign, to mobilize others, and to convince local governments. So in terms of spreading the word, you can help us online or in person. On our website, SCSBO.ca, you can download resources like posters, messaging guides on how to speak about the campaign, a toolkit about how to host a Sue Big Oil house party, and other things. I know there's also the Sunshine Coast has its own website too.
Yes, we do.
So ours is SCSBO.ca, yours is SCSBO.ca. And you can find that on the back tables. So in addition to helping spread the word, we're also approaching local candidates and encourage you to do the same. So if you could speak to any candidates for the upcoming municipal election and ask them if they would support suing big oil, so we can find out who are the climate champions who are willing to do this. And then after the election, people in different communities across the province would be forming delegations with other people in their communities to visit city council to try and encourage them to join this lawsuit. In fact, we have a webinar coming up on Tuesday, September 27th to train people, to train Subic Oil supporters about how to engage with candidates and your local government. So I encourage you to join us there. So, but first you need to, I encourage you to sign the Subic Oil Declaration, and there's ones you can sign on the back tables for the Sunshine Coast. We also have it on our website. And by signing the Subic Oil Declaration, that does two things. One, it helps your voice be counted, and so that we can use those numbers and say this many thousand people, or this many people in your in your riding or your community are supporting Subic Oil. And secondly, it helps us keep in touch with you so that we can update you about any important things that are happening with the Subic Oil campaign. I wanted to mention that there's over 20 organizations that have endorsed the Subic Oil campaign. We also partner with the Georgia Straight Alliance and with a youth environmental group called Shake Up the Establishment. And if you're involved in any community organizations that might also be interested in endorsing or partnering with us, then please give us an introduction. We'd be happy to tell them about the campaign. I don't know if I can take questions now or not now.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got about 5 minutes for questions for Fiona. So
I know there's usually a lot of questions.
I'm sure
about how the lawsuit works.
And we'll have time afterwards as well where you can approach her directly if that's okay with you, if you can stay for a little bit. Okay, great. So does anyone have any questions for Fiona? Yeah, Darren.
Yeah, I have a question. In the lawsuit that you're launching, is it for all costs related, or is it directly related to events that have occurred and or mitigation costs that we need to look to? So is it broad or is it specific?
I'm just going to repeat the question for the Facebook Live. So the question is, in the lawsuit, is it just for individual incidents and events specifically,
And
or mitigation? Yeah. Or for broader costs associated with climate impacts?
Well, it will be up to the local governments to decide exactly the terms of the lawsuit, or the local governments and their lawyers. What we propose is that it's for climate damage, but also climate preparedness and climate adaptation. Yeah. That's it.
Thank you. Yes, over here.
Yes, I certainly agree with suing Big Oil for all the damage they're doing and have done. But I think probably what they're going to say in their defense is that, everything was done legally. They did it all under permit with proper leases and, permission from the federal government, mainly. So wouldn't it make sense to include the federal government who actually gave them the license to carry on business in that lawsuit? I know usually in lawsuits you name everybody that's responsible, right? And in particular instance too with the Trans Mountain Pipeline. There's protests this weekend in New Westminster, I believe, about that. So, like, why, if they're not included, why wouldn't you have included the federal government?
So the question is, should the federal government be included in the lawsuit in addition to the big oil companies, because the big oil companies, based on the question, were operating legally? So is the federal government not also implicated?
So again, it will be up to the local governments exactly who they're suing. We're suggesting the world's largest oil companies like Shell, Chevron, Exxon, BP. I think that federal governments are already, I believe, being sued. But I think that, and also when governments are having to pay these costs, then it's really the taxpayer money that is paying these costs, and we're trying to change the nature of the business and make them so that they're paying their true costs, so that so that's why we're focusing on the oil companies.
Great. Question over here?
Two things. One, when we're talking about the federal government, the defense that they could probably bring up is the fact that they've been getting fed false data from the oil companies for years. So they might be able to point to that as being something that would be legal cover for them. The question I have now, full disclosure, I'm from the States, so my idea of what legal fees cost here is completely off. So I apologize if this is already covered ground. $1 per person seems a little light when we're dealing with all the big oil and their budgets. Are we getting funding from somewhere else?
Yes. So with
Do you want
one,
to repeat the question?
go ahead.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So the question is $1 sufficient from each, $1 per resident from each participating community sufficient to cover the legal costs to sue these oil giants?
Okay, thanks. So we're saying, sorry, at least $1 per person, and the Vancouver motion also says at least $1 per person. So we've estimated, you know, we might need it kind of depends because we don't know what lawyers will be hired. It's not ourselves who are the legal team. The governments would hire. They might use their in-house lawyers. They may hire class action specialists. We're hoping that they can keep down the costs by hiring lawyers who work on contingency, partial contingency, pro bono, volunteer basis, but it does still cost a lot of money regardless. So in addition, with Vancouver's $662,000, we're hoping we will get a couple other big communities in addition to smaller ones. And then in addition to that, we're planning to do crowdfunding and seek other sources of private donations and grants, foundation money, things like that.
So you're going to be tapping other
We are.
resources on this one,
We
and you have a somewhat realistic idea of the budgetary requirements of going after the most flush
We
legal
have
team.
researched that, and I'll also mention that one of the great things about doing a class action lawsuit in British Columbia is that if we lose, then we do not have to pay the other side's legal costs. And in every other province of Canada, they would have to pay the other side's legal costs if they lost, and that would be prohibitively
No
expensive.
financial risk.
Yeah, so
Okay.
no financial risk.
We'll take one last question from the back there.
At what point does it become a class action lawsuit? What's the threshold to make that determination?
So at what point does the campaign kick off as a class action lawsuit? What is the threshold? How many communities do you need to pass resolutions to participate?
I meant to look back up.
Get back to you on that.
I think, yeah, I'll get back to you on that one. I think we just need a few communities and enough money. Yeah.
Great. So we could be one of the few. Hey,
Yeah.
Sunshine Coast? Amazing. Fiona, thank you so much. And you're sticking around for a little bit? Okay, fantastic. So there'll be an opportunity to check in with Fiona after the formal programming. There are some seats up here, so if anyone is feeling like you'd like to sit down, please don't hesitate to pull up a stump, a log, yes, stump, please do. And Fiona also mentioned the upcoming elections, the local elections, which are on October 15th. That's to elect the directors of the Sunshine Coast Regional District, Mayor and Council of the District of Shishalh, Mayor and Council of the town of Gibson. So part of what we need to do is make sure that there's a fantastic voter turnout to get people to care enough to show up and vote for our elected leaders in this local, in our local government. And related to that, the Sunshine Coast Climate Action Network, the Alliance for Democracy, and the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association are putting together a questionnaire that will go out to all candidates. And we will be asking questions about conservation, climate change, and Sue Big Oil. So stay tuned for that, because we're going to see very clearly whether the candidates running support what we're up to here. So I'm going to take a moment to introduce our next speaker. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Avi Lewis. Avi is a documentary filmmaker. He's the co-author of the LEAP Manifesto, and he's now an associate professor at UBC Geography. And he's going to be sharing with us what Sue Big Oil means to him, why he's involved, and why it matters right now. Please join me in welcoming Avi Lewis.
Hello, everyone. How's it going? You said use my outside voice, right?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you, Alaya. Candace, thank you for coming and for those beautiful words to get us going in a good way. Told Candace that we got visited by a family of orcas this morning at my place, slicing through the Salish Sea waters and reminding us why we're here. But I don't think I need to remind folks on the Sunshine Coast why we come together around protecting everything that we love and everything that we hold dear. I want to start by offering some thank yous. I was blessed to to be invited by West Coast Environmental Law to take part in the provincial launch of the Sue Big Oil campaign. And I used all of my relationships and networks and connections to plant seeds wherever I could to start up some of these local groups. But the Sunshine Coast Sue Big Oil organizing team has gone further and faster in a more sophisticated and thoughtful organizing strategy than anyone in British Columbia. And I'm not surprised, because this is the Sunshine Coast. That's right. So to that end, apart from Alaya, who you've met, I just want to thank and name the people who have done an extraordinary job organizing so far. Dawn Allen and Anthony Perret have been at the center of our organizing efforts, as well as Alaya. Amy Brooks is here, Jules Smith, Justine Gavias, who was at the back table, had to take a step back from the group because she's running for Area B Director. That's right. The inimitable Leanne Johnson has provided an anchor for us and a lot of local knowledge. Penny Brown, Suzanne Sanger is here, dropped in on a couple of meetings here and there. Duncan Smith asking questions from the back has made us a beautiful website. Jeff Keithley and two political organizers who are volunteering their time away from a political work. Gabriel Velasco, who helped us start the group, and Nick Wheeler Hughes, who's moved here recently to do organizing. So thanks to all of the organizers. So I want to take a little bit of time to zoom out just a little bit and observe. We've been, one more thank you first. There's a lot of candidates and local politicians who came here today because they understand that this is a critical issue facing the community. This is an innovative, energetic, and forward-looking initiative, and it's the place to be this Sunday morning. So all candidates and local politicians, thank you for coming. That really matters. We see you, we hear you, and we will be in touch after the election if you haven't signed already. Our charm offensive had just begun. All right. So we've been lucky on the coast this summer in terms of climate impacts. And it's shocking to say that in a stage 4 water alert, which is now an annual occurrence. But the rest of the world, not so much. This was the summer that the phrase heat dome became a lived reality in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Europe. Parts of the Yangtze River in China, the largest river in Asia, just dried up this summer. A third of the country of Pakistan was underwater in that flooding. And right now, Tropical Storm Fiona is bearing down on Puerto Rico just 2 days before the anniversary of Hurricane Maria some years ago. And so this isn't going anywhere. This is now what we're living in. We're living in an unfolding emergency. And the question is, what are we doing about it? What are we doing? What can I do? What can we do? What can you do? What are we doing as communities? We're approaching the threshold of tipping points. The natural tipping points, most of them are beyond our control now, and we're going to watch them unfold. That's horrifying. But there are social and political and cultural tipping points that we can influence. We can put our shoulder to the wheel and shove our society forward over a tipping point where we actually start acting like it's an emergency. There are tipping points we can influence. And this little campaign, in this little province, in this part of the world, is a fantastic example of how we can create tipping points and start some forward momentum to hurtle downhill into real emergency climate action. And I'm very, very proud that we're innovating in this way on the Sunshine Coast and leading. I have brought my warrior clipboard of hot pink to show how I'm coming out to fight today. So that's what today is about. Really, we're introducing the campaign, we're having a formal launch, we're coming together as a community, but this is a get-to-work meeting. And when I'm done and Alaya's done, we're going to get to work together because we're not in a time for endless speeches and research. We know what's going on. We got to get to work. And that's why I'm thrilled to see so many people here on Sunday morning to get to work. We're going to sign anyone who hasn't signed up, tables at the back. We're going to have an organizing barnstorm at the end of this meeting, and we are going to get to work together. So we know that just like big tobacco, big oil has known for more than half a century about the harm its products cause. They've advanced fake science. They've spent billions in advertising their virtue, their commitment to green energy. I'm going to speak bluntly now. It's bullshit, and we know it. That story that in The Guardian, it is absolutely, like, even for people who should be unshockable when it comes to the behavior of the big oil and gas industry on this planet, it is shocking These internal emails that got dumped in this congressional committee in DC are like, they are laughing at us. They make their commitments to net zero by 2050, and then they tell their staff, don't pay attention to that. We don't mean it. We won't do anything that actually harms our business model, which is business as usual, which is extract and consume and burn endlessly as the planet burns. They literally admitted, quote unquote, that they are gaslighting the public. Everything you can imagine that they are saying in the boardrooms, they are saying and worse. So they know, they profit, they lie, and it's time for them to pay. Just their fair share. Nobody's saying they should pay for all of it, but we are saying they have to pay. Who has the money to pay for the damages that we're facing? Have you been to the gas station recently? Okay, so yeah, right, I know, good, great, terrific. But lots of working class people are going to the gas station, and they are being mugged at gas point day after day by these companies that are profiteering in eye-watering ways in this moment. So the research came out 3 weeks ago, a very serious academic survey of the actual profits of the biggest oil companies on earth. $3 billion a day, day after day, week after week, year after year for the past 50 years. $3 billion a day in profit for 50 years. Over $50 trillion in profits while the planet burns. They have the money. We just have to go and get it. Because we've heard a little bit about the local responsibility for infrastructure and the costs at the local level, and it's true. And let's remember that after decades of downloading responsibilities onto local governments and austerity, where the higher levels of government have been withdrawing the state, withdrawing public services, withdrawing public finance, local governments are out on their own, not just paying for washed out roads, not just paying to relocate Cooper's Green Hall, which we were finally on the verge of building after years of community fundraising and consultation. And finally, the geotech engineers were like, wait, you're building a community hall at sea level? How many decades do you want it to be here? Back to the drawing board. Possibly millions more in costs. It's not just for the costs we're seeing. We are living in infrastructure at every level that was designed for a climate that no longer exists. We have to rethink everything. Those costs are going to be in the untold billions of dollars. We have to go and get that money. We have to sue Big Oil.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I want to make one other big point for this, because, the question period is always good for all the reasons this is crazy, all the reasons this is bonkers, all the reasons we can't do this, all the reasons we can't win. Okay, fine. There's lots of reasons. There's lots of questions. That's fine. There's not just one reason to sue Big Oil. In my view, there are two. One, we have to go get the money. There has to be corporate accountability for the crime in progress that is continuing to expand fossil fuel use while the planet burns. But there's another reason too. I want to geek out for 1 second. Because now, I find myself a professor of geography. My 10-year-old who's hanging out in his sleeping bag across the street knows more about geography than I do. I don't know how I ended up in academia, but I've been reading some academic papers. And there was a huge paper released last year that tried to answer the question, why, after 30 years of climate talks, 30 years of climate mitigation, conversation and policy, why, when we know what the problem is and we know what the solutions are, why haven't we bent the curve on emissions in 30 years? Why are emissions continuing to climb year after year globally? And they did this huge interdisciplinary paper. They brought together academics from geopolitics, from economics, from energy modeling specialists, and others. The answer to the question of why we haven't bent the curve boils down to power. This is the academic answer. Power. The power of the status quo. The power of business as usual. The power of big oil and gas. We should start saying and gas every time we say big oil. The power of big oil and gas to buy politicians, to change the rules, to make it all legal what they've done. The power of that status quo force is the boulder in our path. That is the block to the path that leads to a healthy future for everything that we hold dear. And so we have to chip away. And that's the second reason why I think that Suing Big Oil is incredibly important. These companies operate under the law, but with social license. We withdraw their social license. We delegitimize the forces that are bent on profiting from the destruction of everything that we hold dear. We revoke their license and we will start to bend the curve. We will start to turn the supertanker around. We can only change the path of human history when we remove the obstacle in our way. And today, it is the social license of big oil and gas to operate in our communities, to build the wood fiber LNG, to ram through the Trans Mountain Pipeline, for the federal government and the provincial government and all levels of government to continue to subsidize and permit fossil fuel expansion. We have to stop that. And Suing Big Oil is a big shot across the bow to say this is not okay anymore. We are revoking your social license, and we're starting right here in Roberts Creek, Bassam today. So there's one other thing that I read this week that I thought of in coming here today. And this is the last thing I want to leave you with. I read this great little piece in the National Observer by one of the founders of this Quebec grassroots citizens movement, anti-fracking movement, RVHQ. 12 years ago, a group of residents got together when they got wind of a dirty deal that the province was gifting the subsoil of the St. Lawrence Valley to big oil and gas to drill 20,000 fracking wells with almost no public benefit, right? The classic thing that big oil buys with its political influence and money and power. So they formed a local group, they started organizing, and just like in the Sunshine Coast Sioux Big Oil organizing group, they started making power maps of local groups and local officials. They started identifying organizations that might be friendly. They started writing petitions. They started gathering signatures. They started researching all the tough questions that would come up at the Q&As. They started making their facts and their websites and their resources tabs. Oh my God, the resources tabs, people. And in 12 years, they have built a movement across the province of Quebec that has changed the conversation about oil and gas in one of the most important provinces in this country. They have got a ban on fracking. They reversed the social license for fracking. They've got reparations from some companies for the damage done to water tables in individual communities from fracking. And in the past few months, they have introduced a bill under a right-wing government in Quebec that knows how to read the room. They have introduced a bill to ban future exploration and exploitation of oil and gas in the major province of this country of Quebec. That started at a meeting like this. That started with a group of residents like this, building the petition, finding the local politicians, signing people up at the back of the room, and building a movement that will change everything. Thank you. Let's get to work.
We'll just take a couple of minutes for questions for Avi. Does anyone have a question?
Maybe none.
I know there's one. We got, yes, Donna. Okay.
Comment.
Yeah.
In the regional district elections, there's only one area where there's a contest. All the others are acclaimed. So it's important that your questionnaire that you send out also goes to the people who have been elected
Acclaimed.
by acclamation. Yes.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Very good point. We will do that 100%. Any other questions?
Sure. How we can manage the cost of litigation?
Yeah, well, this was touched on earlier, how we manage the cost of the litigation. Remember the suits against big tobacco? They started with the same kind of odds. They started with the same kind of questions. How are you going to go after an industry with pockets like that? How are you going to go after companies that have whole floors in shiny buildings downtown that are full of lawyers on staff? It happens. The culture changes. Grassroots power can change the political calculus, and then the money starts to show up. We raise money through grassroots efforts, and we now have tools like we've never had before to do that. We get local governments to make a down payment. That dollar per resident is not going to pay for a massive multi-year class action lawsuit. That dollar a resident is saying, we believe that this is good for the people who elected us. We believe that we need to be on the right side of history. We've done all kinds of good work on climate action here on the Sunshine Coast. And our local politicians have done a fantastic job, but we've got way more work ahead. And this is saying we're making a commitment to going and getting that money that must be paid in damages. And so there are foundations, and there are rich folks who care about the environment, and there are governments who come with public money when lawsuits like this start happening and get on the right side of history too. So you can't imagine the barriers before you've taken the first step on the journey. We have to create the momentum that makes the money the least of their worries, right? There are many barriers to get over. We'll get over all of them with people power. That's the bottom line.
Do you think the lawyer may act like from Bruno or get paid only if they win?
Yeah, some of these arrangements are done on, like, the lawyers in class actions get a percentage of the judgment if they win, and that's one way to do it. That's one way to protect communities from unreasonable costs. There's lots of different ways to structure it. And again, I don't think we should get bogged down in the details of how to fund the suit. There have been thousands of successful class action suits against major corporations in every jurisdiction in the world. And there are lots and lots and lots of models to choose for about how this gets paid for. It's good to ask the questions, but there's absolutely many different ways to fund a lawsuit like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby, you just said, let's not get bogged down. But one thing I would mention is a perfect model is the producer responsibility that is Recycle BC.
Mm-hmm.
We can use something like that where we make the producers responsible for every liter they sell through taxation or even a small amount of money we pull from them, like Recycle BC, which is known to be $1 billion in money sitting there just for recycling. That's just recycling. Imagine what we could get from oil through.
This is a great example for folks online of producer responsibility.
Yeah. That
you pass laws that actually make producers responsible for the disposal of their products, for the consequences of their products. And when it comes to the question of what is government's role in this, remember, this is one tactic. We're in a big fight. Candace was talking about the ways that climate connects all the issues, connects all of our living systems. The fact that we need to draw on the leaders and the warriors and the teachers and the healers in ourselves. The fact that this is an issue of housing, of transportation, of our energy source, of the care economy, of the low carbon care work that should be the center of our economy, like the essential workers in the pandemic who were never valued or compensated. Those are climate solutions. There are climate solutions in every sector. This is one tactic on one point in a time when big oil is extracting mind-bending profits, in a time when the cost of living is soaring beyond people's capacity to pay for the basics of life. We are going after these most profitable companies on earth and saying, not on our watch. This is one campaign, and it's connected to all the others. And maybe this could be like a little gateway drug for people who haven't been involved in climate activism. Maybe Sue Big Oil is just the first buzz. The first taste is free, folks. You sign up at the back, and before long, you'll find yourself an intersectional climate activist. What is sexier than that?
Amazing. Thank you, Abby. So I will be the last formal speaker today, and thank you all for your time. And again, if you'd like to sit down, please do. I'll only take a few more minutes, and then we are going to get organized, and that's going to be just so awesome. So we don't have long to wait for that. I said my name was Alaya Boisvert. I was born on the Sunshine Coast in Shishalh land on Suing, in Wilson Creek. Hope I said that okay, Candace. Practicing. I was born in the same house that my dad lives in today. And I'm not of Indigenous ancestry. I'm very proud French Canadian and of Jewish Polish ancestry. And I was, like a Sunshine Coast flower child. I was like a next generation hippie, the modern day peacemaker. My most likely to in my grade 12 when I graduated from Shishalh Secondary said, "Save the whales." I didn't come up with that. My friends did. And what's crazy is there was a hot minute when I doubted standing up here today for this campaign because I was worried that I was going to look like the bad guy. That people would look down on me and think, how could you be so aggressive to think of suing big oil? Don't you drive a car? And can you imagine the psychology, like that I doubted being here today? But I did. And then I quickly got over that because I've spent my life dedicated to figuring out how to be a good human on this planet, how to take care of people and the life forms that we belong to and that belong to us. I left the Sunshine Coast at 17 to go to Montreal to study. And I studied history and culture and politics. And I studied about the Earth systems. And remember, this was 2 decades ago, more than 2 decades ago. And I learned about things, simple things. Avi talked about tipping points. I learned about something called the Albedo Effect, which is the way that the planet is, it's a self-preservation mechanism to keep heat out. The white parts of the planet, which are the poles and glaciers, they reflect the sun's energy back out into space. Without that white covering the planet, the heat just comes and comes. The less ice cover we have, the more heat reaches the planet and stays. I learned about things how the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide at a very fast rate. And when it does so, it changes the chemical composition of the ocean, so much so that it affects fragile ecosystems and can destroy coral reefs, as we've seen. And when the ocean has topped up its capacity to absorb carbon dioxide, guess where it stays? In the atmosphere, where it warms as a greenhouse gas, more and more warming. And I learned about social constructs like the economy that we made up as people. We made up this thing called the economy. It doesn't exist in nature, and we made it up. And we also made up that within the economy, you know what's considered an externality, something that is outside of the economy? The environment. The environment is an externality. It's not incorporated into the economic model and thinking. Pollution is an externality. And then I went on and eventually I did a master's program in sustainable development. I learned about something called positive feedback loops. And in this case, I'm not talking about feedback positive in the good way. This is where one thing begets another thing and begets more of that same thing. And that's what's happening with heating on this planet right now, because we're losing ice cover. The oceans are tapped out. They can't absorb any more carbon dioxide. We are still burning more and more. Permafrost in the Arctic is melting, and methane, which is a crazy, it's so much more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, is being released, and that's going to warm the planet more. This is scary stuff, man, when you actually understand how this Earth systems works. And I learned about the civil unrest that follows when people don't have access to water anymore. Oh, there's no more trees to cook a fire, right? Or to fuel your economy. When resources become scarce, people get scared. And I've seen it myself. I traveled to Guatemala, I did an internship, and I arrived, and a few days later, Hurricane Stan hit. And I was living with a Mayan family, multiple generations, the abuelos, the grandparents, and the grandbabies, and these 2 foreigners that were like totally shocked, and we didn't have power for 10 days. And every day, at the end of the day, when they fed us one more time, they said, we made it through another day. And there were people on the roads trying to dig out their relatives when their homes had been washed away. Can you imagine? And Lytton First Nation was mentioned. And that is such a beautiful community. If you haven't gone, it's gorgeous in the interior. And yes, the town of Lytton did burn down last year. Well, you know what happened this year? A beautiful elder named Eva, who I work with to build a playground on the west side of Lytton where there's no playground. The kids live over there. They have to cross the bridge to get to school on foot if the ferry is down. Her house burned down because there were more fires. And she wanted to have a playground built for her kids. Do you understand, like, the magnitude of what we're dealing with here? It's so incredible. And you might say, you know, these things happen. There are hurricanes, there are floods, there's fires, there's always been, there always will be. Well, no, not true. Because we are seeing 1 in 50 year, 1 in 100 year, or never before recorded, record-breaking weather events happening again and again all over the world. And it's just so clear that the Earth is out of balance. It's out of balance. And it's right here with us. You know, I was lucky not to have been born on the front lines of climate change, but I'll tell you something, my daughter has been. And she's here today. She's a 10-year-old little climate activist in Davis Bay Elementary, and I couldn't be prouder of her. But she is scared. She's scared. And no one is immune. You know, we talked about the cooking sea life, the drying creeks, the rising ocean levels, the forests being consumed by fire, flooding homes and roads, wiping out species, and climate change is pulling at the threads of our society. That's the other thing that we really need to recognize. And it is terrifying. It's terrifying our children. You know, I mentioned my daughter, she's 10, and I've done my best to raise her to be an honest, responsible, and caring person, right? That's a job of every parent, isn't it? And when she does something that's wrong, that she doesn't know is wrong, it's my job to teach her, to show her a better way. But when she does something that she knows is wrong, it's her job to make amends. And I don't know why on earth we would expect anything different from the executives sitting around the boardroom for the last 4 decades, making decisions that knowingly would cause the kind of crises that we're facing today.
That's right.
It is absolutely absurd. And unfortunately, I would love to be parent to some of those folks over the generations, but I can't. I can't do that. Neither can you, unfortunately. But you know, that's what laws are for. And that's what the courts are for. We create laws when adults behave badly. That's what laws and courts do. They decide, they say, this is what you need to do to behave appropriately in this society. This is what we will tolerate. What you've done is unacceptable. And that's what this is all about. It is such a basic concept. The very basic values of decency, honesty, goodness. That's what we're asking for big oil to do. And for all of us. I mean, isn't that what it's really all about? And I hope their knees are knocking when they see communities like ours coming together. Because this is just so outstanding, isn't it? Like, look around. This is so awesome. When we say enough is enough, that we see your manipulation, your lies, that you ignored the risk to public safety. And we will not tolerate this any longer. We will not tolerate your deceit or your bullying. And we as taxpayers will not pay to clean up the mess that you've made. I think the thing that really gets me shaking is to realize that our lives depend on it. It really does, and our children's lives depend on it. And, you know, we need a new energy future, as Abby said, where human civilization can be capable of sustaining and restoring life, not destroying it. Of course, that's possible. We're capable of that. We just, you know, we got to figure it out. We have lots of answers. And in fact, around the time that I was born, the science was clear. And these big oil companies knew. And they did nothing about it to turn the tide. They said, screw that. I'm going where the profits are. And I'm going to lie and tell nonsense and advocate to politicians to get them to go in the opposite direction. Because that's where the money's at. Like, what? So, I've learned through trial and error that the antidote to apathy is action.
Yes.
And the salve for despairing soul is community. Okay? So we're here today to get together and to get organized, to stand for something that really can make a difference. The Sioux Big Oil Sunshine Coast crew were formed, we're informed, and we need you. And I'll tell you something, we need each other for more reasons than to convince our local governments to sue big oil. We need each other to build the communities, the Sunshine Coast, to strengthen the fabric of our democracies, which is in jeopardy right now, to address misinformation. And you know why we need each other? To be ready for when the climate emergencies come, because it's coming. And we want to be ready with loving arms and resources to support each other to get through what we are inevitably going to be facing. The alternative is unimaginable. So that's why we need each other. So let's do that. Let's get connected, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we have a task at hand, and part of our task is to collect as many signatures as possible for the Sue Big Oil campaign that we can present to local governments. That would be ideally, at a minimum, 3,000 signatures of Sunshine Coast residents. So there are going to be petitions to sign, and you can sign up to take petitions to collect from your friends and families and coworkers and go canvass on the street and talk to people about why this matters. And we're going to get organized today based on where you live. So we are just so excited. And this is a moment, like if you're wondering whether you want to do this, I guarantee you do. It will fill you up in ways you never could imagine. So please, we're going to do this with the regional leads. Are we ready, regional leads? Yes, amazing. Okay, so if you are from Gibson's and area, you're going to hang out with Dawn, right? Oh, no. Sorry, something's changed. Okay, Leanne, amazing. Leanne is going to be...
people over here. We can move now, right?
Okay, so...
No, wait a second. We have 4 tables,
Yeah.
right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's put Gibson's at that table right over
Back,
there.
right.
Half
Someone
Moon
hold up
Bay.
a sign with
Okay,
Gibson's
so
over there.
if you're...
Go, Leanne.
I'm going to call out the places and the names and the locations for these. So if you're from Gibson's and area, go with Leanne at the back right table, the green picnic table. If you are from Roberts Creek and area, you're going to be with Jules. Jules is in the front right table. If you're from Shishalh, you're going to be with Penny at the back left picnic table. And if you're from Half Moon Bay all the way to Egmont, you're going to be with Dawn. Thank you so much for being here. You are beautiful. We love you. See you canvassing.
You were phenomenal.
Oh, God, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm going to put in a link here for you to sign up and join the campaign. And then we may just sign off, but please do. Sign the petition and say that you want to join the campaign, and then we'll get in touch with you and get you organized within your community.
Yes.
Sunshine Coast, SueBigOil.ca, www.SCSBO.ca. Join us. Thank you so much for being here. Ciao.